sometimes pastors resist taking naps or even Sabbath days. And I've known this to be true most of my ministry as I've watched my colleagues and kind of figured out how you do Sabbath whenever Sunday is a work day. It's different for pastors. My Sabbath is usually Friday. But I fell in love with a series of novels about a priest who definitely did not know how to take a nap or a Sabbath day. This whole series is set in a little town called Mitford. I think it's an imaginary town, but Father Tim is the ideal pastor. You probably want him to be your next pastor. He visits every single person in the hospital, including people in the hospital who aren't even from his church. He always brings meals to the people who are at home sick. He even brings a cake to the ladies' bazaar. I mean, he's the perfect priest. He, of course, spends hours studying for every sermon, delivers it flawlessly from the pulpit without notes, and of course, is active in the town and an important leader in his little town. So every pastor I know has kind of a love-hate relationship if we've read the Father Tim books, because we can't measure up. And most of us already have kind of that internal barometer, like we're always thinking at one hospital visit, like, am I going to get to the other 3 hospitals? You know, whenever you're trying to do 1 minute on a sermon, you're like, but I haven't done any minutes on the Bible study. There's always something, right? And I've spent enough time in pastoral counseling with normal folks like you, not that you and I aren't normal, but we're kind of not normal. Anyway, to know that a lot of us have that weird judge in our head, right? Telling us, oh, you didn't quite do enough, or oh, you did too much, or oh, you didn't quite do it well enough, or oh, you were showing off, right? So Father Tim is definitely haunted by those voices. As you get into the novels, you find out he had a dad who wasn't very unconditionally loving, and that voice is always playing in the back of his head. You know, how can he as an Episcopalian priest rise up to Baptist dad standards, who definitely would not have wanted him to become Episcopalian? But so in the novel, he's going along, doing all this stuff, working, and guess what he misses? Every sign that he needs a nap. He's getting flushed. He's constantly thirsty. He's feeling some tightness in the chest. He's feeling a little wobbly in the legs, until one day he literally falls down and passes out and is hospitalized in a diabetic coma. It's a turning point in the novel, and a wake-up call, I think, to pastors who read it and think, I can't stand Father Tim, to say, I think the author is writing us a lesson that every human being needs to hear. That whatever we're doing is probably already more than enough. And whoever we are is exactly enough. The disciples had just begun their ministry with Jesus. In Mark's gospel, it's very compressed. I always love with confirmands to say to them, start by reading the Gospel of Mark. If you've never read the Bible, I recommend that book highly. It's short, it's fast-paced, it's very intense. And so Jesus has no longer proclaimed, he's just barely finished launching his ministry. He's called the disciples, and then he sends them right out into the mission field, on their own in 2x2s, to go out and do the work he's been doing, to preach, to teach, to heal, to serve, shake the dust off if people won't receive you, but then you got to keep going. It's a frenzied pace. And they come back to report to him about this time out in the mission field on those dusty roads of Palestine. And they report miracles that they had no idea they could have performed. Great moments of healing and service and preaching. And also times when they had to shake the dust off because it just wasn't going to work. But Jesus knows there is more ministry ahead. And so he calls them away to rest a while. It's just one little sentence. One sentence that Dan read for us. And it can be missed so quickly. In all of the Gospels, some version of this sentence comes around, but it's short. Almost as if the Gospel writers were a little embarrassed that they had gone away to rest a while. But that rest rhythm is a gift that Jesus is teaching to those first disciples so that thousands of years later, modern day disciples are invited to create that same rhythm of rest and renewal. It's a command in the Big Ten, I call them. It's a command to keep the Sabbath holy. Just so you're clear, there are 10 of them, and they're a big deal. It's weird in Methodism that we're arguing over things that are not a big deal, and we often disobey many of the Big Ten. So the Sabbath day is another part of that rhythm. That Sabbath time is the more extended time. So we don't know how long the disciples were gone for that rest and renewal. Might have been 5 minutes, might have been 5 hours, might have been 5 days. It's hard to tell in Mark's gospel because he compresses everything. But that's one type where you go away for retreat. But the rhythm of continuing every week to have time to just calm the soul, to allow God's breath to enter our breath, to really make room for the Holy Spirit to merge again with our spirits, creates a miraculous rhythm for life. And in our world that is so frenzied and so fast-paced, I think it's a rhythm that we need to hear as both invitation and even command, helping us to do exactly what Megan did by simply listening to the words of a song. That can be your Sabbath rest. I once heard a sister religious at a convocation talk about how important vacation was. It was the first time I'd ever knew that nuns and monks needed to take a vacation. But of course they do. They're in ministry. They're working hard. And she said, vacations are absolutely essential. I think it should say, honor the vacation and keep it holy. But then she started talking about vacation as moments when she vacates the worries of her life. And she would say, sometimes I have to take 15 or 20 vacations a day. What a rhythm to think of taking that moment to hear the words of a song, to just take a deep breath, to pause, and let our minds and souls recenter on the one who promises that He is always with us. The one who says, just be still and know, I got your back. I got this covered. And I don't know about you, but most days I'm like, yeah. Oh, wait a second. That was that voice. That wasn't chatter. That was the holy voice saying, be still and know I am God. The one who holds the whole world in holy hands has got this. And if anything about this last week or this last month or maybe this last 3 or 4 years has convinced me of the need to remember that, the tumult and the frenzy has convinced me. The rest and renewal makes space for us to remember who is God and that we are not. Now, I know the other chatter is happening in your head. Probably even right now, you're like, okay, yeah, it's really quiet in here. Can I get to my to-do list? But I think making that space really eases up the to-do list. Making that space calms down the chatter. And making that space allows God's voice to get stronger so that we can really discern, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be? And how can I follow Jesus most closely? I think that's why Jesus called those disciples away to rest a while, because the very next thing they had to do was to feed the 5,000. They didn't know what was coming, but I guess he probably did. Could they have fed 5,000 people with some loaves and some fishes if they hadn't had that time to rest and renew? preparing them for a miracle unlike any miracle that they had performed out there on those dusty roads without Jesus at their side. But with a little space in their souls and Jesus at their side, they fed 5,000 people. How mightily can God work through us when we make that kind of space? To allow God's miraculous presence to make us much bigger than our to-do lists ever could be, much stronger than our type A personalities could ever help us to become. God's presence allows us to do all things through Christ who strengthens us. This rhythm transformed the lives of the ministry of the disciples. And I invite you to think through what in your life might be kind of hindering you from allowing that kind of rhythm to transform your life. What is the frenzy in your head or the judge's voice that's preventing you from hearing God's voice, or the to-do list that's haunting you? And over the next few minutes, whenever you get a chance, I invite you to pull out that index card or that notepad at home and write down a word or draw a picture of something you know you need God to just dissolve in order for you to reclaim the gift of a rhythm of rest and renewal. Whether that gift is vacations, 20 of them a day, of taking a minute, or taking a day each week, or actually scheduling renewal and retreat time for an extended period. What do you need God to help you release in order to make space for the miracle that even a fictional character like Father Tim experienced when he woke up from that coma to still many weeks of healing and renewal, to discover that the hungry still got fed, sermons still got preached, hospitalized people still got visited, the congregation cared for one another and their community while he rested and healed and renewed. All because God's got this. Father Tim remembered that he was a beloved child of God when he was working really hard and when he was laying in that hospital bed, resting and renewing. Loved no matter what, loved no matter who, loved no matter what we do or don't do. That is the gift that God is God and we are not. Thanks be to God that we can be still and allow God to take care of this.